All right, welcome back to the Tectonic Takes podcast. Your hosts today, Abram and Ivan. We are joined by Toronto FC fan Connor Somerville. Connor, how are you doing?
Hey, Ivan. I'm good. Yeah. Thank you for giving me the title of fan. It's much more accurate to what I am now, but yeah, I used to do media stuff, so we'll pretend like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so a little bit of a backstory. I met Connor and several other great writers and content creators through MLS Multiplex. Connor, along with our friends Josh and Drew, were among the most heavily involved in the podcast side of things on MLS Multiplex. And since then, Drew and Josh have gone on to do many great things, and so have you, Connor. But now you are, focusing on some other projects, but we're glad to have you with us today to talk about, a rare occasion nowadays as MLS continues to expand. These West versus East matchups are becoming rarer and rarer, so it'll be a great opportunity to see how our two teams stack up. And I guess we'll start with Toronto's last game with Inter Miami before we get into the bigger picture of the season so far. So, Connor, tell us about what happened there.
Yeah, it was probably Toronto's best game of the season. They came out a little slow, but I think the weather sort of presented issues in that front. If you're not familiar, it was like -11, -12 Celsius with the wind chill. So it was tough to play in. It was tough just to sit and watch, never mind playing. And I think Toronto sort of found their footing as the match went on. Brandon Cervenia had an incredible game. And was really he was key to their midfield and really helped push Toronto's attack and was pretty crucial on that right side, linking up with Larea and creating some really good opportunities. They ended up getting their first goal just after the half. I think it was the Mark Anthony Kay who scored off his back. Not looking at the net, which that's how they drew it up.
We're very familiar with that with Wando, just scoring however you need to score, as long as it goes in.
Yeah, it wasn't a stunner. Let's put it that way. Actually, that was the second goal. First goal was a stunner, unbelievable team goal. It started with an Osorio pass to Bernardeschi, who laid Larea in, who fired a perfect cross across to Osorio. Really well worked goal. It was one of their best goals of the season so far, honestly, if not their best. So yeah, that was really the highlight of their season so far, though. This season, injuries have been a bit of an issue, as we'll get into when we preview next week, which I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, in general, they're coming off their best game of the season. So yeah, hopefully they're coming in hot. We'll see. But
right.
Yeah.
Cool. So that does line up with based on what I've followed, with Toronto. This is the first win of the season, so it makes sense. It was also the first good performance. And thank you for describing that in great detail. And just looking at, the roster, we'll get into that in more detail. There's so many great things to see there. There's a lot of potential, and that was kind of the story that they were selling Toronto fans with last year. It's like, wait till the summer when we get all these Italians and all these great players in, and it's starting to take shape a little bit, but it's taking a bit longer than people have expected. Is that kind of the vibe?
Yeah. The situation around Domenico Crescito, who was a big acquisition, along with Insigne and Bernardeschi, didn't go to plan. He ended up retiring and then signing about like a week or two later with Genoa in Italy. So that sort of threw their plans sort of for a loop, because now they were also looking for a left back, and on top of basically having to completely reconstruct their back line apart from right back, which was a huge undertaking for them. Ended up being a positive outcome somehow, convincing Matt Hedges to join and bringing in Sigurd Rosted and Raul Petretta, who have both been pretty solid so far. Holes to their game, but in general, they've been pretty solid. And then yeah, the additions of Bernadeschi specifically has been amazing. He's fit in really, really well. Very athletic, extremely talented. He's basically drives their attack because Insigne has missed a lot of games with injury, and he's out right now again. He's going to be out for next weekend and the game after that, and potentially even the game after that. So it's really down to Bernadeschi to drive that attack, and he's done a good job of it, but he's sort of on an island, which has been a challenge. But yeah, those additions have been extremely crucial, and fans are still demanding more. A DP attacker, especially, I think people would like as a striker, because Ayo Akinola, Adama Diomande, and Hugo Mbangu, now they're having DeAndre Kerr fill in up top, haven't really worked out. So yeah, we'll dive into that though later with the game breakdown and all that stuff.
Right. And if your estimation of Insigne's earliest possible return is correct, it looks like we're looking at April 15th when Toronto hosts Atlanta United. And I feel like Atlanta United has this thing with a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference. Toronto, New York Red Bulls were like, the fireworks are always coming with those sorts of games. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. And injuries were kind of the big story with the San Jose Earthquakes game, aside from the scoreline, Abrams. So we'll talk about the St. Louis-San Jose game then.
Sure. Wow. I mean, I didn't expect a lot going to this match. We talked about it pretty extensively between the podcast with Justin and our Twitter space. Like I said to you earlier today, I didn't expect to win, and I thought a draw would have been a really good result for us. I didn't expect to lose that bad, and not just lose, but it's probably like the worst scenario for us because Grezzo's gone, Plus is gone. God, Rodriguez injured.
Yeah.
God, it sucks. It's just a really bad situation, so like I'm more hurt by those injuries than the scoreline, to be honest, because we were kind of just like looking at that game as like, okay, if we lose, no big deal. They're on a hot streak, and what happens. But now it really affects the coming games, and with is the Capo out? Is he? No, he's with international duty. That's another thing. We have a few players, Trauco as well, and so can we get Italy on the phone, have them take Bernadeschi with them? Like, God,
dude, you're already have enough people out of this starting 11. Like, we'll get into that.
Yeah,
you think you're decimated? Don't even start.
Canada men's national team loves its Toronto players. Yeah, so
yeah,
I'm very happy to hear that. I'm very happy to hear that because our second kind of team isn't super strong. We've made a lot of additions, and some of the players on our current like second squad would have started last season, but we were very bad last season, so it's not really that's not a really great situation to be in. So yeah, I'm just very frustrated. That's all I really have to say. Is just I'm worried going into this Toronto game, even more so than I was prior.
Right. I'm most frustrated by the old habits that reverted in that game. Like the first goal that Gioacchini scored, okay, sure. Yeah, that can happen. And 1-0 down on the road, that's still manageable, that's still salvageable. But once again, one thing that was killer that really turned 3 points into 1 point and 1 point into 0 points so often for San Jose Earthquakes last season was getting goals scored on them in the last 5 to 10 minutes of halves. And that happened again with Klaus at the end of the first half. And that's just a huge mountain to climb. St. Louis, I think people seem to have this misconception that it's just because they're the new shiny toy, they're the new team in MLS, that these fans are excited, but that excitement will wear off in a few games. St. Louis City has been a phenomenal soccer town, not just with the players that have come through from that town, but they've been, following soccer for so long, and they really feel it. They've had many teams come and go as well. So their fans are passionate. That passion is legitimate. It's just the fact that they are winning is just a bonus. We had Justin last week. Like, he didn't expect, St. Louis. No one did, to be flying out the gates like they did. And their podcast, the Soccer Talk Lads, they started the podcast the moment that St. Louis City announced that they had MLS status. And so they got to see all the steps come in between. And so maybe it's less a surprise for them, even though that they're still definitely blown away by how good they've been. But it shows that progress is not in a vacuum. I think there's frustration to be had. It's legitimate frustration. And part of that frustration from San Jose Earthquakes fans is that we've seen so many teams come into the league since 2012 when they last won the Supporter Shield, or anything of note, really. And many of those teams have gone on to win MLS Cups since they've expanded, since they've entered the league. Many of them have won other competitions or have been perennial playoff contending teams, have had playoff runs. San Jose Earthquakes have barely made the playoffs. Every time they had, they've lost in the first round to Vancouver and then to Sporting Kansas City. We made to the quarterfinals of MLS is back, but that's all we have to show for it. So there's that frustration, but we also have to look at it this way, that progress doesn't happen in a vacuum. Just because San Jose Earthquakes are making moves to get themselves better, we can see that in the first 4 games of the season. So are 28 other teams in this league. Toronto made many moves to get better, and that progress is not in a vacuum. It's not just forward progress. And for St. Louis, they just didn't start working just in 2023 when they're finally going to play MLS matches. That work has been in the forefront for at least several years. And finally, they get to see the fruits of their labor, and it's developed into some enticing soccer that now that they're not playing against us, we'll get to enjoy more. But for San Jose Earthquakes, I think we do have to take this into perspective that we lost against 2 teams, Atlanta United and St. Louis, that are clearly better than us. We beat 2 teams that I think it's fair to say we are better than them, Vancouver and Colorado Rapids. And now our 5th opponent, Toronto FC, is another unknown variable in the sense that, it's West versus East. We don't play those teams very often. But also, Toronto is on 5 points, we're on 6 points. So I think that's an even matchup. I think we're going to learn a lot more about these teams, and we're going to learn about the depth of these 2 teams as players are being pulled from international duty, as players are coming back from suspension in the case of Romero Montero. Players are wrestling with injuries, coming in and out in that situation, and then we'll go from there. So I think let's dig deeper into the lineups for Toronto FC. So I haven't had too much of an opportunity to look into some of the lineups from past games, but I noticed that you brought in 2 goalkeepers this season. Is Sean Johnson the starter so far?
Yes. Sorry, I muted myself. I don't know why I'm out of focus. Sean Johnson has been the starter, and without him, Toronto would be in a lot of trouble. He's bailed them out quite a few times, especially early in the season. I think, you mentioned the 5 points, and I think their record, their performances have actually kind of almost been better than their record. They blew the game against DC in one of the worst ways you can. They had good performances in their other games. They just sort of blew it at the end of the match, which I think comes down to a lack of squad depth, and that is also early season fitness issues. So I think you maybe might be underestimating them a little bit. The problem we have is, you mentioned the second goalkeeper who we added. He's not playing because he's getting called on to international duty. So their backup's going to be Greg Ranjitsingh. Hopefully that has no impact on anything. If it does, Toronto are going to be in a lot of trouble because Sean Johnson is extremely important to making up for some of the mistakes of this back line. And he's not Romero, our backup keeper, is not the only player gone. We're going to see if they can work out a deal with the Canadian national team. But as of now, Richie Larea, Mark Anthony Kay, Jonathan Osorio, and Iola Canola are being called up for international duty.
Right.
Yeah. That's a lot of talent. and that's three crucial pieces, and one borderline important starting player getting pulled from their 11.
Yeah.
Which is a problem when this team's squad depth consists of Victor Vasquez, and that's it. Christian Gutierrez, but he only just got here. So it's going to be a challenge next week, and again, we'll dive into this, but international duty is going to, as it sounds like with San Jose as well, it's going to play a huge part in this match, and you guys getting Montero back after being rested could have a huge impact on this game. Right.
And with including Tomas Romero, who normally wouldn't play, that's still 5 players total. That's about 20% of any MLS roster that's being called up for international duty. So that's definitely significant. And I'm guessing you're concerned about the drop-off between Sean Johnson to Tomas Romero to
Greg Ranjitsingh. Yeah.
Ranjitsingh, yes. Is simply due to experience. Sean Johnson has been an MLS starter for over a decade. Tomas Romero showed in flashes as previous club LAFC that he's capable. He's definitely earned a number 2 spot, and he's certainly capable in that position. But then Ranjitsingh is still more developing and hasn't really had too many opportunities. Yeah.
I don't think I'd call him developing anymore. I think he's just sort of a third keeper at this point. I think he's like 26, 27 sort of thing.
My bad. I thought he was a little bit younger than that.
So my concern isn't necessarily an experience. My concern is quality.
Right.
Because Sean Johnson is one of the top goalkeepers in MLS. We saw that with his numerous years with NYCFC.
Yeah.
Thomas Romero is unproven and, as you said, is inexperienced, and he's better than Greg Ranjitsingh, who has not very many MLS matches and has primarily been a USL goalkeeper in his career, which is a problem.
Right. And another player who has had a lot of MLS matches is a player that kind of was the start of the first wave of success for Toronto FC almost a decade ago now. How the time flies. Michael Bradley, the club captain. And when he first came, I believe, from Roma to MLS, that sparked a lot of controversy, mainly from U.S. men's national team fans. Like, what the heck are we doing? But it's safe to say that Michael Bradley has made himself, a beloved figure in Toronto FC through his years of service and being a crucial part of that midfield.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. He's been, apart from probably Sebastian Giovinco, the most important signing Toronto FC's ever made. He's still, at this point in his career, extremely important to the midfield, which, read into that what you will. At this point, he has lost a step. I think most people could probably outrun him at this point, especially professional soccer players, which is an issue. But with how they've been playing him and using him a bit deeper, we've sort of mitigated those concerns. Those concerns pop up freshly in all their glory again, with Osorio and Kay potentially having to represent Canada and being out of the squad, leaving Victor Vasquez, who in his own right is extremely slow and has had injury issues. And
36 years old,
36, You're very familiar with him from his LA Galaxy time. Being the only
his first stint with Toronto, too.
Yeah, his first stint with Toronto, very successful until injuries unfortunately got in the way, and then he secured a move to Qatar. It's going to be an issue. I think pace could be a problem in this game. And back to Bradley, though, he's so important. He's the captain for a reason. Yes, he's Bob's son, but I'd almost put him as more important than Bob Bradley with this team, because I feel like at this point he's basically holding this locker room together and has created the culture and kept the culture what it is until today.
Yep. And so we've taken a look at, the forwards and the midfielders. We talked a little bit about, Victor Vasquez. So the defense is definitely part of the team that, without Dominic Crisquito now, that probably, raised a lot of questions. Players like Matt Hedges stand out for me, and then being able to loan in Richie Larea, I think, is a good move. So tell us a little bit more about the defense.
Yeah, it's basically a completely brand new front line or back line and front line, sort of. But yeah, it's basically a completely new back line. Sigurd Rosted, Matt Hedges, and Raul Petretta all brought in this offseason. Petretta, 24-25, I think. Came from Turkey. He came up in the Basel system, I believe. He's technically good. Defensively, he's all right, but he's nothing really special. But he's solid. Same with Sigurd Brosted, who's I think 27 or 28. He's big. He's slow. He's all right on the ball, but he does make some interesting decisions at times. But he's solid. You're not running through Rosted or Hedges because you know who Hedges is. People listening to the show know who Hedges is. He's not known for his pace. And on the counter, they've really shown there's opportunity to exploit them. Larea has some pretty good pace. If you've followed MLS for a while or even Toronto FC, you know how crucial he's been. And yeah, getting him on loan has been really important. And we'll see what happens come June when his loan expires. Hopefully they can end up finding a way to make it permanent. But yeah, they're very attacking based, sort of the back line in their fullbacks, because Petretta and Larea love to get in the attack. Love it. Overlapping runs galore. So there is opportunity to exploit in that regard, but aerials you'll struggle. Rosted, Hedges, both very good in the air, and as I said, both big bodies. Yeah. You're not going to move them.
Yeah, Bobasi will have his hands full, and then our other midfielders, they're not known for their height, so it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think a guy like Cade Cowell could have a really, really, really good game if he's able to exploit that lack of pace, because he's got pace to burn.
Right. It's kind of like in pickup basketball, where if you have a bigger guy guarding a smaller guy in the post, the bigger guy should come out on top. So in those like corner kick situations, but like in the perimeter in the open field, if there's options to run around them, you better watch out. One last thing that stands out for me with Toronto FC, similar like to FC Dallas for the United States, I feel like Toronto FC, along with Vancouver and Montreal, because only 3 Canadian clubs among Major League Soccer. So prior to Canadian Premier League, there was a lot of pressure on those 3 clubs to develop a lot of Canadian talent. But Toronto has a lot of commitment to developing homegrown players and Canadian players. I see a lot of HG tags among the Toronto squad. Who are some of the homegrown players that stand out to you, you're looking forward to seeing this season?
This season, there isn't really much opportunity in that starting 11 for homegrown players, but somebody like Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, who's got a very uncertain future, who's extremely highly touted, what can they do with him? Will he leave early? I don't know when his contract expires. It's entirely possible it ends in June instead of December, which would be a big loss to their bench. Hugo Mbongu, who is extremely talented. He's a very, very good attacker, but he's only like 17, 18. So he's still very raw, and I don't know how many opportunities he'll have this season. He got a couple games as a substitute this year, but hasn't really done much with either of them. If you want to include Ayala Akinola, although he's like a U22 at this point, he's a tough one. Injuries have hurt his career, and he's lost that explosiveness that made him really good in the MLS's back tournament. So he hasn't had that opportunity to succeed, really. He only came back like middle of last season, and he never really could get his footing underneath him. And then this season, he plays a couple games and then does his hamstring in, and he misses a game, and he's on the bench on the weekend behind DeAndre Kerr, who I don't know if you can him again as a homegrown, but DeAndre Kerr's a guy I think people should watch. He's good attacking. He can play in center of the midfield. He's not great there, but he can. He's got a pretty good motor. Other players, I'm blanking on his first name, but Thompson. He's pretty solid.
Kosi Thompson.
Kosi Thompson. Thank you. I was going to say Nkosi, but that's Nkosi Tafara. Kosi Thompson is a guy who can play at fullback. He can sort of play in the midfield. He's sort of like a utility guy almost. Again, though, like that quality isn't really there yet. There's still places that they have to develop. That's sort of what the back end of this roster looks like. Even you look at Kobe Franklin and Femi Antonoglu. They both, like we saw Kobe Franklin a couple weeks ago, he looked like a fish out of water. He was not having a great time defending. And I think that's a lot of what this roster is. So, you say, who are you looking forward to in terms of homegrowns?
Yeah.
There's still a lot of development needed there.
Right. And we can relate to that because a lot of our conversations among San Jose Earthquakes fans is the anticipation of one player in particular, Cruz Medina, who played a lot in the MLS Next Pro last season. He's had some appearances on the benches sometimes for San Jose Earthquakes, but he's got plenty of potential, high ceiling. But even among like other young players, like there's a midfielder ahead of him, Nico Shakiris, that, we're probably going to try to integrate him into the roster more once he's healthy. So we got to be patient with our young players. But I think it's a question that I enjoy asking when I get a chance to talk to people from other clubs, because I get excited seeing, it's great when we get to draft players out of college. That's awesome. But it's also incredible to see the great work that these academies are doing in bringing in players, especially, like I said, a lot of the Canadian men's national team, you can trace some roots or connections to Toronto FC, and the ones that don't have ties to Toronto FC probably have some ties to Vancouver or Montreal as well.
The unfortunate part of that whole tracing back to Toronto FC thing is all of them left the academy. So that's a bit of a problem. Like you look at Mark Anthony Kay, he was part of Toronto FC's academy before they let him go. And then he went to York University, and following that, LAFC, where he found a ton of success. So Toronto have struggled in that department, but at the same time, they found guys and yet didn't produce them. It's sort of a weird middle ground. And again, as both of you know, having watched LAFC probably pretty closely, considering how much that rivalry is. Yeah. Bob Bradley doesn't use young players.
Right.
So it's sort of tough to break into the team in that regard.
Right. Rivalry is definitely a term that could be used to describe San Jose Earthquakes and LAFC. I think when it comes to you throw LA Galaxy in the mix, I feel like LA Galaxy and LAFC are the two school bullies that are constantly drawing fights at school. And we're like that third bully that like gets tossed out of the ring in the first round, and like we're just going to just escape further embarrassment sometimes. But we're kind of forgotten at some point, but that's the challenge. I think that we want to, reestablish our presence within the Western Conference, and we have the opportunity to do so. But it's going to take a bounce back performance over the next few games to see what kind of season lies ahead for the Earthquakes. Abram, the big question going into that St. Louis game was, how's our midfield going to look without Jimmer Montero? Who was going to be that player to step in? Would it be Tommy Thompson or Michael Baldissimo? We ended up seeing both amid different circumstances. So what did you think of how they played, Abram?
Well, you're saying the question is, how is our midfield going to look? And the answer to that is bad. It's just so Tommy started at that cam position, and defensively, he kind of just like ran alongside whoever he was marking, and it wasn't that strong defensively. Attacking wise, he looked okay. He got on the ball. I think he made like one or two mistakes, but nothing I would really hold against him. Baldissimo pleasantly surprised me. I thought he was more mobile than I thought he would be. Very small, and that's to no fault of his own. I think he fights for the ball. I like him. I think that he is a good backup when we need a backup, and we definitely did last night when Greza went down. I was hoping that he would, when he got back up, I was hoping he would be able to finish the game. But no, you could see him. He was limping and really struggling.
He's got that fire in him,
Yeah,
Baldissimo. Reminds me a little bit of Eric Remedy.
a little bit, but
Mhm.
much less. Much less. Remedy was a very intense player,
Yeah.
um, and I think Baldissimo has more ability on the ball than
Uh-huh.
Eric Remedy. Um,
Right.
uh, so I remember listening to the Quakes Epicenter last night, and Jamin and Alex Morgan were kind of going back and forth on Tommy Thompson and what happened in the second half when they switched the formation from a 4-3-3 to 4-4-2. And um, people were saying, well, Tommy wasn't working out, Tommy was bad, and whatever. And Tommy wasn't great, but the reason they took him out wasn't because he was terrible, um, which I think he was okay. I would give him like 6.5
See?
out of 10.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, he was okay. I think if he had more time, he would have warmed up more. Anyways, but we had to sacrifice a midfielder to bring on a forward. That's just how it is. We can only have 11 guys on the field, right? And so Tommy
Yeah.
was that guy, unfortunately for him. And then we had Baldissimo and Yule holding it down in the middle there. Um, I think we looked a lot better, to be honest. Um, we had talked about prior to this game. I know Favi asked a question, um, and it didn't look likely that we would switch to a 4-4-2 and bring Benji on. I think we all expected Benji to be the forward, the second forward alongside Jeremy Abobasi, but we had Benji on the left instead and had Cade Cowell be the second striker, and that was very interesting to me. It was an interesting choice, seeing as Benji's more. I would say that striker is his natural position.
Right. I think it was also an interesting treat that we normally see either Cade start and Benji sub on for Cade or vice versa. We got to see a lot of Cade and Benji playing together. Abram,
It was
what did you
weird.
see with those two playing? Yeah, it was weird. Yeah.
It was weird. I thought that honestly, I think it was a mistake. I don't not that they played together, but to switch them because so Benji did miss out on that shot where he kind of skied it. And you can say what you want about that. You could say Cade should have scored the first one, and if they were in
Yeah.
opposing positions, maybe Benji would have scored that. I think Benji is the type of player to score that open goal where Cade slid for it. That's the kind of goal that Benji scores for us all the time. He's just a, you know,
Poacher.
get to it, yeah, poacher type player, and he's also much better in the air than Cade Cowell. And this wasn't Cade Cowell's worst game. I liked him on the wing. He was doing a lot to get behind that fullback. Remember, he just turned around and just like muscled him out and just kept running. Unfortunately, he then ran out of the field. However, I think that that's the kind of situation that if you keep it in play, you are in a dangerous spot where you can make something happen. And so yeah, that's why I think Cade should have had more time on that left wing, and Benji more in the middle. The way they played together was a little bit strange. I felt like Benji was kind of like dropping more as he likes to do, but like I don't know, they just didn't really connect. It was more going to the other side of the field and still going through Espinosa and like trying to work it that way. But yeah, that's what I saw.
All right. Yeah, so I think that because of how rare it is that they were able to play together, they had to adapt in that way. They had to, figure out those positioning for those chances that were few and far between against a really good St. Louis team. And unfortunately, those are the chances that you have to score. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And that'll probably make the performances of those players look even worse than it was. I think we have to give them credit for continuing to find themselves in those good positions. I think that San Jose Earthquakes were creating good opportunities, especially when they were under pressure. Like, they weren't just forcing things for the sake of it. They were, at least in the final third, I felt that I was impressed with what I saw at times. The problem was for me is that when they were trying to get from defense to midfield, I feel like their passes were getting picked off way too easily. I credit the defense that, yes, on the night that they conceded 3 goals, it could have been 4 or 5 because they were making a lot of big interceptions, saves, tackles, but it was also self-inflicted wounds. We got to see them in action more because their previous play trying to get the ball and then St. Louis getting in the way of those passes forced them to have to clean up those messes that some of them were their own, some of them were unlucky, 50-50 balls, whatever. I don't like to talk too much about luck when it comes to St. Louis because I feel like that's been one of the prevailing narratives about their season so far, which I think is a discredit to them. But ultimately, you make your own luck. St. Louis were better than us. They scored the goals, and we had to figure out what goes on there. But one thing that does give me some solace, and Lloyd Sam said it during the commentary, is that for the San Jose Earthquakes, when they fly back to PayPal Park, that they just go back to training and take the lessons from that, but they still have to take the positives from what they've earned so far this season, those 6 points, and know that they're capable of getting more points down the road. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So a mixed bagged season so far for both San Jose Earthquakes and Toronto FC, and that's reflected in the standings so far. Can't really read too much into them because it's only 4 weeks in. Some teams have only played 3 games in because with 29 teams, there's always one team that misses out on a game week. But as of now, with 6 points, it's good for San Jose Earthquakes to be 7th in the Western Conference. In a season now where 9 teams from each conference go to the playoffs. But I do think we are being helped out by, of the 5 teams that have yet to win in MLS this season, 4 of them are in the Western Conference. Vancouver Whitecaps, LA Galaxy, Sporting Kansas City, and Colorado Rapids, as opposed to the one Eastern Conference team without a win being the Chicago Fire. As for Toronto, in their Eastern Conference, 5 points is good enough for 8th. And they're among 3 teams with 5 points. Orlando City and Red Bulls also have 5 points, so they're ahead on goal difference there. So when we look at the standings, again, we can't read too much into this, but I think that that's the goal right now because both the San Jose Earthquakes and Toronto FC, it was a tough 2022. We just got to be above the line this time. We preached patience on both sides, I feel like, with the projects that are ongoing. Toronto FC bringing those Italian players and other skilled players, a bit of a rebuild. In San Jose Earthquakes, our first year under Luchi Gonzalez. But I think that our depth is going to be tested a lot more, and we're going to have to figure that out. Going into this match, Connor, what do you think is the biggest concern going against San Jose Earthquakes?
Has to be the internationals. Who goes, who isn't available?
Yeah.
If Richie isn't available, who fills in at right back? If Kay and Osorio aren't available, what do you do in that midfield? I assume it'll be Bradley and Cervania. Do you bring Victor Vasquez in as a starter? And then if you bring Victor Vasquez in, who plays left wing? There's a lot of question marks of the internationals. That's the biggest concern right now is, will they play? If they don't, what does this lineup look like? Does Bradley have to depart from his treasured 4-3-3? Mm-hmm. Because I don't know, honestly, if he'll have the players available to make it work next weekend. So that's my biggest question. Hopefully that gets solved over the coming couple days. But as of when we're recording this, there really isn't any certainty to who's available, if anybody will be available that has been called up for international duty. And, if they all get called up and aren't available, that's going to be a really, really big problem for Toronto.
Right. Yeah, those are valid concerns. A lot of reshuffling of the deck there. Abram, what concerns you most about Toronto FC as an opponent for this game?
I am always going to be, concerned about anyone going up against our weakened backline. Mensa is reported to still be with us, and he does cover a lot of ground. So I am excited to see how he carries the team in the absence of Strelko, Rodriguez, Acapo, our whole defense. Um, so I worry about like you guys keeping Bernadeschi and what he can do. I think that's like the obvious worry for anyone. It makes me more confident to hear your concern about your team, and also worried about the international call-ups. So I guess it's whoever's B team is better is going to win out tonight, or not tonight, Saturday.
All right. And I'd say my biggest concern, Federico Bernardeschi stands out for me. I think that the midfield was where I was worried about San Jose Earthquakes going to St. Louis, and there's going to be a lot of quality in midfield. I think that between Federico Bernardeschi, Michael Bradley, Victor Vasquez, and whoever else is there, I think that they'll be able to control tempo at times, and they're going to have to because that's how they play. And, San Jose Earthquakes are going to have some more physical options there. Jackson Newell will be able to, want to assert his authority. I think this is a big year for Jackson Newell because similar to Michael Bradley, Jackson Newell has had his fair share of criticism in the U.S. men's national team circles, and he's also kind of, waning in importance in terms of like who are the game winners on the San Jose Earthquakes. You think of Jeremy Abobasi, Christian Espinoza, even Cade Cowell. The idea of Cade Cowell and what he can show in flashes, and he has some good games in him, is considered to be more valuable than what Jackson Newell sometimes brings to the table. But especially with all the other things going on in the midfield around him, Jackson Newell has to be that stabilizing force again, and that's what we're going to rely on him to do. So I'm going to ask you each this question. Your club will win this game if what happens? So I'll let you fill in the blanks. And this time we'll go to Abram first.
I think our team, San Jose, will win this game if Cade Cowell can get out of his rut that he's in. I think that, like Connor was saying, Cade has the opportunity here to do very well. And usually when we say that, it kind of goes the other way. We always jinx Cade Cowell. But if he can really turn it up and reconcile the mistakes from last game, if he can put them away, it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to go into the net. I think that he can make a huge difference in this game.
All right. Connor, Toronto will win this game if what happens?
I feel like I'd be stupid not to say Bernadeschi is Bernadeschi.
Right.
If he can capitalize on his athleticism, his pace, and from the sounds of it, your weakened back line, even if it isn't scoring himself, but setting up a DeAndre Kerr or whoever fills in up top, if he can do that, if he can take advantage of his opportunities, San Jose are going to have a very, very tough time dealing with Toronto's attack, and everything starts with Bernadeschi. So starts and ends, honestly, with Bernadeschi. So yeah, if he can play like he has this season, if not better than he has, because conditions aren't negative 20,000, I think Toronto have a very good chance.
Fair enough. And I'll add that San Jose Earthquakes will win this game if they have short-term memory. I think that what we saw with Atlanta United was a very typical San Jose Earthquakes traumatic collapse. But then it was like it never happened in the next two games. And a big part of that was being at home. And maybe it's going to be tough to get over this St. Louis loss because I feel like fans especially, like I don't know what the players were thinking, but among the fans, we kind of rationalized that loss, saying, okay, Thiago Almada with 2 goals in the last few minutes of the game, the last stoppage time, he was able to produce some magic, and that undid everything we did for 90 minutes. It's unfortunate, but it was kind of a freak series of events. And then we won 2 solid games, but now for the most part, St. Louis City outclassed us. They took their chances, we didn't, and then they were able to dictate the game so that they would come out on top. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. But maybe San Jose Earthquakes can conveniently forget that there's that, black eye and just return to home and do what they do best, show up for their crowd. And there's a sense of new invigorating energy among this community now. I feel like these results, they could have broken teams in the past, and they would have also broken fan spirits in the past. But I think that we see a lot of things that we do like among this team. There's still some issues among depth, among certain mistakes that happen, but that's soccer. That's life. There's always going to be something we're going to be worried about. But ultimately, I think that what's cool about Major League Soccer, even though that is kind of unfortunate that 2/3 of the league will get a chance to be in the playoffs, you might argue that certain teams should not have that opportunity. But that means that there's going to always be something to play for until the very end. So there's going to be an opportunity for these teams that are not favorites to win the MLS Cup, which neither Toronto or San Jose are favorites to win the MLS Cup in 2023, to continue to grow their programs and rebuild and showcase what they have to offer, because I see a lot of gems in both of our rosters. I think it's going to be a really good game. And we do also have to cherish these opportunities to play against teams we don't normally play against on opposite conferences, because I think sometimes we get into this routine. It's like, oh, here comes Portland again. Here comes LA Galaxy again. Here comes Houston again. But it's also something different and fresh to get used to when Toronto or Charlotte or Chicago comes to town. Or we fly to DC, we fly to Atlanta or Miami. So really looking forward to this game. Thank you, Connor and Abram, for spending some time with me and previewing this game. Connor, would you like to share any social media or plugs?
Yeah. First off, bold of you to assume Toronto is an MLS Cup favorite, but
My bad.
You can check me out on Twitter at CWGSOMERVILLE. I tweet about Toronto FC, Canadian men's national team, occasional MLS thing, and some hockey. That's pretty much it. I don't really do much else, to be honest. I work, but yeah. Thank
you, OJ and Anobi, for my fantasy team this season.
OG is the GOAT, and everybody should have given us all of their first-round picks for him. But yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. This was fun.
Cool.
Talking about Toronto FC is something I enjoy doing, if you couldn't tell.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, especially during this exciting times for growth in both Canada and US among so many different levels of the game. It's great to be able to see your perspective and to keep in touch with this friendship that's developed since our days at MLS Multiplex. Abram, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, JSweebam, JE_SUIS_BAM. Also, if you haven't already, if you're a Quakes fan, you like talking Quakes, please join the Discord. I'm sure Ivan knows where you can find the link. I think it's like in the Instagram and also on Twitter in the bio.
Right. And if you find me on Twitter, I will also happy to be sending you a Discord invite as well. And you can find me on Twitter at Ivan Ornelas2. And at Instagram at Ivan the Writer 95. Abram, sorry to cut you off. Did you want to add something else?
No, I just wanted to say that the Discord is really popping, especially on game days. We're getting very passionate in there, and if that sounds like a place where you want to be, hop in. It's really fun.
Right, and we also have channels for international teams and other club soccer. So regardless of whether you're a Quake super fan or you just want to talk about whatever team you support, even if it's in, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, you could talk to us about it. And on Twitter, I also share my blogs, The Beautiful Game, there, so you can check those out. And I cover, not just San Jose Earthquakes, but also Oakland Roots and other leagues that we have access to across, North American media. So I'm happy to talk soccer, regardless of what the league is, regardless of what the content is, it's all connected. And I look forward to, this game and to catching up with you all very soon. So, all right. So take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.